Welcome to Seal Island National Wildlife Refuge in the Gulf of Maine. Puffins were long imperiled in the Gulf of Maine. Breeding puffins were eliminated from all but one colony in Maine by the late 1800s due to egg collecting and excessive hunting. People also thoroughly modified coastal Maine in ways that favored the survival of gulls and other birds that can displace or prey on young puffins and other seabirds like terns that nest on these islands. It was a real profound loss for the island ecosystems and their habitats in the Gulf of Maine. Luckily, intact puffin colonies remain farther north in Atlantic Canada. So in the 1970s, Steve Kress, a biologist, pioneered a restoration effort for puffins in the Gulf of Maine. He began by translocating chicks that were anywhere from like 3 to 40 days old from intact and healthy colonies on Great Island, Newfoundland, to artificial burrows on islands in the Gulf of Maine. Initially, breeding puffins didn't return to nest on the restored islands. Steve Kress realized that puffins are social birds. So puffins not only had to imprint on the island where they fledged, but also experience indications that the island is safe to breed when they returned. So in other words, they needed to see and hear other seabirds on breeding islands. So Steve Kress began using decoys and playback of audio recordings of puffins and other birds to trick the puffins into thinking that the island was already inhabited by breeding birds and therefore safe to raise their own young. In the mid to late 1980s at Seal Island, something around 950 chicks were translocated there. Breeding was first documented in 1992 with 7 pairs. Then in 2012, there were about 200 pairs. So really a fantastic success story with puffins in Seal Island. Atlantic puffins, they lay 1 egg per year in excavated burrows or rock crevices. Individual puffins are also long-lived. They can have lifespans of more than 20 years, maybe upwards of 30 years. Our puffin burrow cam showcases the breeding home of Willie, who's the male, and Millie, who have nested in this burrow for many years. They'll share incubation, brooding, and feeding duties until their single chick fledges this summer with any luck. A growing population of puffins on Seal Island is good news for the survival of puffins in the Gulf of Maine, but that also has consequences for individual birds. Demand for nesting burrows can certainly lead to conflict. On May 18 and 19, a different puffin entered the burrow and fought with Willie for dominance and possession of this burrow. This really was a struggle for reproductive survival. Fighting among puffins is most frequent in defense of a burrow during the period of egg laying. So this was a really intense fight between these two birds. It just wasn't a one-off fight either. The intruder came back more than once. And at one point, it looked like he displaced Willie and Millie out of the burrow and then rolled the egg out of the burrow. But Willie and Millie returned. It looked like they were able to displace the intruder, and they rolled their egg back in. It doesn't look like the egg was damaged, and they've been guarding it and incubating it since that time. But we don't know much about the intruder. Maybe he is a maturing puffin looking to establish dominance over a burrow and attract a mate. Maybe he was a late arrival on the island and couldn't find an unoccupied burrow to make his own. Maybe he had a burrow and someone else took it over, and he's just looking to make do the best he can. Maybe this is an older bird whose mate didn't return. We can speculate. There's a ton of different reasons. In 2016, Willie and his previous mate Billy were the ones who invaded burrow 59 and displaced the puffins who occupied the burrow. So competition and conflict, therefore, are not strange or unexpected events for puffins. This is something that Willie did in the past. We spent a lot of time talking about how he had to fight off an intruder, and I know that can be really shocking and hard for people to watch, but Willie did the same thing in the past. So this is kind of like a part of their life. The greatest threat to puffins, though, isn't really competition for breeding burrows. It's really the risks posed by climate change. So I want everyone to kind of keep that in mind as well. We want to help these birds succeed. It's really, especially in the Gulf of Maine, it's highly tied to how fast we work to transition away from fossil fuels, because the faster we can do that, the healthier the oceans are going to be. We need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. We need to keep plastics out of the ocean, and we need to ensure that our fisheries are sustainable. So through those efforts, we can really help to ensure the future of puffins and, of course, the health of our planet's oceans.